Governor Kim Reynolds improperly used federal CARES Act money to spend it on a new software program and her own staff salaries. That's what State Auditor Rob Sand and the Treasury Department's Inspector General are saying tonight. So joining us to talk about this report is Auditor Sand. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
The letter you sent to the State Department of Management, and those are the folks who help control the state's revenue, outlines issues you have with two of the governor's decisions. Can you explain how this investigation got started?
Yeah, very straightforward on this one. We had a number of people who reported, and in fact it was publicly reported, that the governor had put $21 million of CARES Act money into a new computer system for the state of Iowa. Now, the money that she was using is supposed to be for responding to the pandemic. Things like testing, contact tracing, more frontline workers, those sorts of things. And so it was pretty clear that there would need to be a good explanation for this. We worked on this with federal auditors, and the answer at the end of the day was that there was not a good explanation for it, and that money should get respent essentially by the end of the year in order to make sure that it's compliant and Iowa taxpayers don't end up on the hook.
Okay, you write in your letter about the Workday payment, quote, this expenditure was not due to the public health emergency, and if the governor does not redeploy these dollars to a lawful use, they will have to be repaid to the federal government, which will result in a $21 million loss for Iowa taxpayers. It's a lot of money. So is that the real issue here, that Iowa taxpayers could be on the hook for those millions of dollars? Is that pretty much what you're concerned about at this point?
That's certainly one half of the issue, was that that money would have to get repaid. Here's the other half of the issue. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There are people who are getting sick. There are people who are waiting to get tested. There are people who are dying. There are a lot of good ways to be spending money right now that directly mitigate that pandemic, and a computer system for the state of Iowa that we had already planned on having prior to the pandemic just isn't one of them. So a piece of it is financial responsibility. Another piece of it, I think, is doing what the law is written for, which is making sure that the human impact of the pandemic is mitigated.
Okay, so what about the governor's decision to use almost $500,000 of CARES Act money for her staff salaries? Her office has argued that the work her staff was doing was all coronavirus related. So how is the money used in that questionable, as you say in your letter?
That's right, and I do want to point that out from your introduction. To be more precise, it's our office saying that it's questionable, whereas OIG, the federal government, didn't provide guidance on this. But here's why we provided guidance on that. There are a lot of people whose salaries are absolutely, without question, going to qualify as appropriate. Again, people who might be processing tests would be an example. People who are contact tracers, trying to figure out where sick people have been, is another example. The chief of staff for the governor, or the press secretary for the governor, less obviously qualified, would take a lot of documentation to prove qualification. Ultimately, here's the problem with that. With so many good uses for that money, things that directly would mitigate the pandemic, we're taking a risk here, putting it into something that requires a lot of documentation and a lot of support to show that it's qualified. Because at the end of the day, if auditors come back and say, you didn't document this sufficiently, taxpayers can be on the hook, but that's also money that could have been spent more directly, again, on alleviating the pandemic.
And have you gotten a response from the governor herself or her office to your letter?
We have not.
Okay. So you are a Democrat, Governor Reynolds, a Republican. How can Iowans trust that we're not in another political fight here?
Our office has actually released audits where we have dug into issues that people suspected was a problem, and we found out and pointed out that they were not problems. We are shooting this straight. That is something this office has never done before. Traditionally, we only look to where there are problems and issue a report if we find something. What we've actually been doing since I've taken office is just trying to aim for the truth rather than necessarily bad things all the time. And we're going to continue to do that. I think that's what government's supposed to be about. And that's what a watchdog does, a good watchdog. You want to point out bad things, but you also want to sound the all clear when people think there might be a problem somewhere, but there isn't.
All right, State Auditor Rob Sand, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your insight tonight.
Happy to be here.